What's up, world? What's up, Zion? It's Prince Easy coming at you again once more. And of course, as usual, I do have a couple slides that I want to share with you, right? So, of course, before we get to it, I want to issue a disclaimer, right, for the material that's going to be shared here in this here video, right? So, yeah. And well, the tone video this the tone of this video mainly is gonna be children, right? The young children, and how this whole situation unfolding before our eyes is affecting them, right? As we can see how it is affecting the adults, right? And the recent press by Maria from Russia, I think it shed a light to that whole ordeal, right? And the complexity, right? And the choice that has to be made, right? To preserve innocence or exposure. This guy talking about weakness. This is rich. This is freaking rich, right? But you don't hear all of these people who are so accustomed to regime changes say anything about it. The Europeans and the Americans. Was he democratically elected? Is that what you're trying to sell us in 2026? What about 2024, 2014? What about that? Again, this is a true fact for both major religions in Africa, the Muslims and the Christians, right? Sometimes it is the issue of race, sometimes it's the issue of tribe. Literally, it exists, right? But again, these divides are all artificial and they don't serve the general health of the society. It does not. It's ridiculous, right? That's why I asked, what is this thing that people are trying to protect specifically, right? These cultures, these values, right? This is a serious question, yo. It is a serious question, right? They are relics, right? While culture is supposed to adapt and to serve people of that time, not a relic to be put up on a mantle. That's why we have people that have no values whatsoever, right? They call themselves fluid. Why? For the sake of being, I don't know, unique. That's what people need, you know, these days it seems, right? Even the Europeans now are racist against each other, right? Some Europeans see themselves more European than others because of history, and who does it serve really? Right? Like seriously. He prefers, right? These are genuine conversations, right? Yeah. Why is he having airtime to express these views and stuff? To the winter gain an age. Since when? So this happened. They apparently, I don't know, caught a school bus or went to a school or did both. And this is what he had to say. I can recognize that we gotta support these kids. While on the other hand, saying that because you are a parent doesn't mean that you are you get complete immunity from the law enforcement. Yeah. Yeah. Now they're back to name calling, right? The zombie missile has been making headlines, right? It's simply a decoy, but they have been firing decoys for years. But I don't know what is so special about this particular decoy at this particular time to be labeled a zombie missile. So yeah, after how many years? I'm interested to find out how much suppression my channel is under. Yeah, from what I heard, they are preparing these consequences to protect themselves from what has happened and what can happen, because the arrogance glaring. Again, Putin's victory would threaten all of Europe. How? Please make the connection. It's just issue after issue with these people.
Okay, so we made a nice juicy page here. So you have the Pope, the New World Order, the crown of the Ashkenazi. Now, a few things to notice. Back in 1302, Unam Sanctum, we declare and we proclaim,
More like the year 302.
Find that it is absolutely necessary for the salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff. Unam Sanctum, the vote becomes the living Jesus. Which was pre-planned because the first pope was in fact Jewish in the first place. But the people that you consider to be Jewish are actually Ashkenazis. Okay. Those are your Jewish and your Yiddish. Okay. Now, through the doctrine of discovery in 1493, the order was given to the Christians. You know, the Christians, right? The Cretan that is considered highly offensive is no longer used in technical or respectful context and historically referred to a person with the severe mental and physical disabilities, particularly those resulting from congenital thyroid deficiency, cretinism. The term is rooted in a French Alpine dialect word crestin, which itself may stem from the Latin Christianus, ironically used to denote a human being despite their deformities. Notice how we're talking about human beings now instead of man or woman. But we'll move further. So anyway, so they created Christians. Nowhere in your Bible does it say to be a Christian. You're not supposed to be because, blasphemy. Anyway, so through the secret treaty of Verona, right, where we come down here, it says that the Pope is responsible for subduing all of the nations of the world. Right here. Convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep their nations in a state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contrasting parties declare it to be their intention to sustain in their respective states, intimately connected with the preservation of the authority of the princes and the contracting powers, join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, and solicit his constant cooperation in their views of submitting the nations. Right, so basically the Pope was already in charge of Spain, Portugal, Britain, England, pretty much that whole side of the world back in the 1400s and things like that.
Yeah, 400 and more like the Roman Empire.
Okay, so you have to realize that this was being discussed in Congress in the 17 and 1800s. Okay, this was the very reason that we were trying to get the world free. See, because the American Bible, which was the Geneva Bible, right? For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against powers and worldly governors, the princes of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness which are in ye high places, was warning against these very powers taking place. You see, so through the papal bull, right? Through the papal bull, they were able to give permission for people to conquer nations, right? Because the papal bull made it so that they had the ability to collect the estates under parens patri, making it a resource to basically kill people and unalive people in war. But anyway, if you think that it's not still going on, the papal audiences with the UK Muslims. You see, the Pope controls Christianity, Catholicism, the Muslims, the Buddhists. He controls all of it, right? And proof of that is the fact that they still have papal meetings to this day. So the thing is that every single religion comes and meets when these papals come together, right? They all go to kiss the hands of the Pope. That's why he wears the hat of their religion, right? So the thing is that, they created Cesare Borgia, right? They created Jesus. They created the character Jesus, and they used Cesare Borgia to do it. He was a blanket thing for the Bible, okay? He was a blanket. He blanketed many different things and hid a lot of secret information so that it was only be able to be kept between the Masons that were responsible for it. So the original definition of hell by law is the name formerly given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined, right? So right now, the United States is in debt to the king, right? So previous definition is held to maturity. Okay? Held to maturity, when you're supposed to register the estate and all that stuff that everybody tries to talk to you about, right? Okay? Because what they were really hiding was the fact that they used Jesus to subdue the original people of the Americas, because the Geneva Bible doesn't have a Jesus in it. Only their New Testament does, that they created, that they added on to everything, giving you the King James and all the other versions that came. They all came from Cambridge, which is a Catholic printing press, or the Catholic Crown, which was also Catholic. The British Crown, which was also Catholic. The Catholic people created Christians, because Christians are people that are easily controlled and manipulated. They're basically space holders, because once they're subdued, they just send in a shit ton of fucking Christians, and the Christians are basically just empty bodies that walk around doing what they're told, submitting to your masters, right? So the Christians submit the nations, the Jews keep the regulation of the fresh meat coming through. The Muslims are the army, all of the Ashkenazi, right? And so once the nation is full of the Christians, right, the Catholics are just there to sit back and collect. Okay? They're just like the Jews in a sense, right? They just sit back and collect. But the Jews have a service to perform. which is collecting the children to keep the system running, because it's all about the swapping of the children. But the Muslims, right? All their leaders go to meet with the Pope, just like everybody else, which means that all their leaders are corrupt according to their religion, but they still follow their leaders blindly. And that's the funny part about it. So the thing is that the Muslims are the brute army of that's the religious army, the military. They'll send them in to wipe out everybody. See, the Muslims will go in and clear the space. They'll knock out all the Christians, the Catholics, they'll knock out everybody in their path that isn't Muslim and pave the way for the Jews. It's all loop.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth and misconceptions, right? Everybody being a tool, like look right now, right? They use the racist people to attack DEI and what it actually did statistically, and what happened after that. New people came in, right? The Ashkenazi came in. After, what about the universities? Right? They attacked the universities, started a psyop to say that the universities are persecuting them, and I don't know, university leaders are basically inciting anti-Semitism in that sense, right? Because they are letting students protest, right? And again, right, a chain of events, or rather the groups, right? So you have the so-called African tribes, we have the European tribes. Okay, now in general, in a biblical context, first, what he said about the New Testament, right? Paul was told, upon this rock I shall, right? He was the prince, right? He was given the prince, right? He was the leader that was to be after Christ left, right? But if you look at the word itself, right? Let me do this for you. I was looking for something, I couldn't find it, right? For now. But first and foremost, what needs to be established? Paul, Peter, these were not their names, right? We are talking about a deception, right? A deception where one person steals the identity of another, right? That's what happened, right? So the whole situation with Peter or Paul, one of them, in the Old English, it used to mean the one that lost his power, right? Because chaos erupted, right? And you know what happened to the disciples, right? So after that, again, went to Egypt, right? They were taken into slavery. And of course, on top of that, being sent all over the world, right? And of course, the Ashkenaz, the masterminds, working with other neighboring tribes to go against the so-called Israelites, right? And after that, of course, he betrayed everybody else, and of course took power for himself, right? But he himself is also under subjugation of who? The fallen, right? So it's crazy to me that a Christian with a straight face, right, can go on and on and on and on and on and on and talk about all the deep conspiracies of the world, but the devil doesn't exist, you know. It's crazy, right? For people to believe that one particular tribe can continuously over generations perpetuate a certain state of the world without them changing their minds at any time in that course of their history is baffling to me, right? But they do tell you, right? They do tell you, right? They sugarcoat, right? Their language. They sugarcoat their language, right? Like the first spaceman, right? The first Elon Musk, right? Who was Elon Musk, right? The first person to so-called fly spacecrafts in the US over there, right? He said clearly, right, I was inspired by this being I saw in my dreams, or I don't know, when he was tripping on drugs, one of the two, right? I can't remember as of now. So they get inspiration from the fallen, and this inspiration can be and is translated to power over Israelites and the other tribes. So right now we are seeing it out in the public, right? But people are having a hard time apprehending it, right? They're having a hard time apprehending it, right? It's clear as day, right, that a specific tribe is troublesome, right? But as long as people are stuck in the fictitious notion of nation, or rather nationalism, yeah, they are not gonna see it. That's like a blindfold to the world, right? Nations do not exist. These are man-made concepts. They are not actual, natural. In a sense like that, right? Why? Because they do not stay constant, right? They evolve, for lack of better terms, right? Like for instance, that whole West Africa, right? At one point it was called Niger, right? And then it changed because some events occurred that forced the landscape and the territory to change, but the name remains, right? But that is gonna be confusing, and it's gonna cause a lot of disagreement and judgment, right? The simpler way to look at it, tribe. Look at the tribes, then you'll know how far Niger stretches, right? The whole world will become much smaller, right? Because it is in the blood, right? It cannot be easily erased, right? You cannot perform a book burning ritual, right? The Renaissance, remember that? It remains, right? Their people's culture and their values rather change also, right? Just over 2 generations, right? Even 1 generation, you'll have a proper cultural shift. I've seen it in my family. I have relatives that live abroad, right? And their children, they have a Western culture, and of course, Western values, so-called, right? They behave like the people that are around them, right? So what remains constant then? The blood. Your tribe tells us your ancestors, right? So again, we need to learn to see things like that. These nations, they all exist to serve the interests of not us. Okay, that's that's what I can say. Not us. Right? But for somebody, it was very crucial, right? What do you give a name to a thing? Why? Ownership. You understand? So, right, down on the hush hush, right? You didn't even hear this one come out. So apparently that whole noise about Minnesota and the Somali people, and the scamming and the scammers, apparently she was the queen pin of the entire operation. That's why the whole thing just went again, right? These are the times that those interests reveal themselves, right? They get Europeans excited, right? And basically on a hateful footing, so as they can get bamboozled at the same time at the end of the road, because they don't matter. But again, find it the easy way, which is one person transferring their experiences to another, or the hard way, you experience yourself. Pick your poison.
Okay, Max, tell me again what the other player told you during games. So the goalkeeper in futsal, he said some really bad stuff to me, and it just made me get really emotional. I rarely get emotional in soccer. And this guy told me I'm an illegal immigrant, even though I was born in America. He said Trump is gonna get me and send me back.
Again, right? This is the collision, right? What does it mean to be an American, right? That whole notion now is changing. Why? Because America did not exist in the first place, right? It only existed because it served a certain interest. Now it is evolving, right? This boy here clearly has some Asian in him, right? I don't know if it's the mother or the father, right? Again, cultures and values, right? Again, like I said the other video, these are also disguises of people who are actually racists, right? These nationalistic movements, these people who claim we want to serve our culture and our values. No, you are a racist piece of shit hiding behind these two factors, right? That's why I said give me the uniqueness of your culture, right? And to be honest, you'll struggle, right? You'll struggle, right? Because that uniqueness, that feeling of being separate, is what people are looking for, right? And if you have the so-called Americans, and you have Europeans, you have Asians, you have African descent, right? Of course, there's gonna be a fight in there, right? So now we are redefining what it means to be an American, and basically it means you have to come from Europe, and your ancestry has to be of European descent. Hence, the South African Boers going to the US and being accepted and being put into special programs. Hence the persecution of other groups of people, the Asians, the Arabs, the Africans, the Indians. Why? Because nations don't exist. They are ideas put there by people who own this idea of America, right? All of you did not found America. You are just participating, right? You have your so-called founding fathers, right? You just assume that they shared your values or the end goal of what they actually wanted to achieve. But no, the reality was they were a racist piece of shit that had slaves. That was their current situation at that particular time when they were making the so-called America. So again, children now are confused, right? And it goes everywhere, right? Even here in Africa, right? You cannot say Africa now is for black people only. No, you're gonna have a problem, right? Because here in Tanzania, for instance, we have rich African, rich Indian, rich Arab, like rich, like they'll go to war for this nation, right? So what does it mean then to be an African in 2026? Is it like your melanin? Is it your so-called culture and value? Does that make you African? Or Africa never existed? They were just humans, and there were some humans that acted like barbarians. The world is simple that way. But again, like I said, why do you name things? Because you want to possess them, right?
To where I used to live, and I was born in America. I don't live anywhere else. And then he called me an effing B word, and I just don't get why kids like to say those stuff. And it makes me really sad that how they just control their power like that. They think they have power, and it's just not nice.
Look at the child, and this is not even the first clip that I've seen. It's not even the first. There are many out there, right? All of this rhetoric and the rippling effects and how hard it is hitting these young people, right? The guy here is confused. So what then, right? Going back to the question that I posed prior, do we protect their innocence and tell them, hey, we are all human, we are all equal, and we need to love each other, or prepare them for the reality of what they're gonna face, right? Because I guarantee you, there are Europeans, right, who call themselves Americans, right? Europeans, right? Just for the sake of understanding, right? Because that doesn't exist either, right? So European tribes and their children they are sitting them down and telling their children, listen, you are superior. Look at what we have done. We have conquered the whole world, right? Look at this map here, right? Go into Google. Look at how big the British Empire, for instance, was. Right? Look at how big the Roman Empire was, right? We are empire builders, right? The French children they are being told that. The Brits are being told that, and so on and so forth. Which reality now, right? Because the division, now they are inheriting, right? This child here is inheriting the trauma of their parents, right? Just looking around, hands wide, like, whoa, I'm an American. You're not supposed to deny me my rights to vote. I'm an American. You're not supposed to segregate me. I'm an American. The same thing with the South Africans. They can say the same thing. I'm South African. Why this apartheid? I'm also human. Like, you see the cascading stupidity that ensues, right, in the attempts of combating said stupidity. So our focus should be on the owners, right? The owners of these ideologies, right? Because they are the roots of our problems, right? So again, I don't know what to tell him now, right? Do we tell him, you know what, you need to go back to Asia over there? Your people will look at you and it will be like them looking at a mirror. Then you wouldn't have to face this problem, right? And can we call that, I don't know, protecting their innocence or what? All I'm saying is, again, there's a problem at hand, right? And of course we have been focused on the bigger picture, but yeah, we have to look at the smaller picture, in that sense, what it is doing to the children psychologically, right? It is what it is. So she, or whatever it is, calls itself a billionaire, another label; a Zionist, another label; politician, another label; or lobby. A lobby, again, covers and layers for the owners to hide behind, while the rest of society does the heavy lifting, right? He did not become a billionaire without our contribution in one way or the other. Then why do they feel like they could do this? That's the question. When you see them out here proud, and probably they caught a person of color, right? Not a white person. They never come out here and have large statements if they are not. we do not tolerate attacks on places of worship. Is that so? Or is it just a dog whistle for the dumb so-called Christians out there? I hope I'm not I don't know, leaving some individuals behind. We have to evolve and in a spiritual sense, right? And see things clearly, right? Not as some sort of mystery, right? Not some sort of mystery, right? The Europeans have been fighting for years. Why? Tribalism, not nationalism, okay? And of course, the Chinese professor, you remember the one that I used to share here? He usually says, he said something very interesting. He said, most, or rather all evolutions that have taken place over the span of the known recorded history as we know it now have been the result of one, the lower class, basically, let me phrase it like this. It has always been rich men against rich men, right? So a trillionaire, the one leading the evolution, would be a billionaire in that sense. You understand? So we have always been pawns in that sense, right? Pawns in the game of these people, right? So you take yourself out of the game, okay? Because surely you adapting to the game, you know, or rather, you know, like this guy here, right? He tried to adapt, he tried to assimilate the best he could, right? He wore his jeans properly, he, you know, I'm even getting more references to another talk that he had about game theory and how to actually succeed. And he said conforming and assimilating is pointless. We know it, you know it. So why are we asking if what? Why are we asking, right? The Europeans keep complaining that all of these immigrants are coming here and they're not assimilating, they're bringing their culture. Is assimilating enough for them to be integrated into your so-called society with its values and its so-called culture? It's never enough. You have to look like us, right? Just like the pastor here, you know, you not only have to be Christian, you have to look like me. This is tribalism. It's not racism, because race does not exist. Why? Look at the blood. The blood says it all. Right? So let me put a pin on it right there. Let me not go on for long. Prince Easy signing out. Love you. Bye.